Welcome, everyone. This is our 15th induction ceremony of our Hall of Fame. And go ahead. I am Erin McDermott. I'm the Director of Athletics. And as we say, it's a great day to be a Maroon. It's actually been a great year to be a Maroon. Last year, our individual and team performances resulted in the Maroons finishing 15th out of 430 schools in the NCAA Division III Learfield Sports Directors Cup standings. This was our fourth consecutive finish in the top 20 and the second in the top 15. That ranking was propelled by 6 teams finishing in the top 15 nationally. Men's and women's soccer, and our women's soccer team got to the Final Four. Men's and women's swimming and diving, and men's and women's tennis. We had 37 student athletes named All-Americans. 45 were all-region, 4 were UAA top performers, and 10 first years were UAA Rookies of the Year. And this year, our fall teams are keeping pace. Currently, 5 fall teams are nationally ranked in the top 25. Men's and women's cross country, men's and women's soccer, and volleyball. And our men's tennis team just achieved a program first by capturing the ITA Indoor Doubles National Championship. I also wanted to share some other good news with you. Friends of Maroon Athletics is thriving as our dedicated giving society. Last year, Frank Baker, class of 1994, Hall of Famer, and member of, and is a university trustee, made a challenge gift of up to $500,000 to inspire others to give back. Frank is matching all gifts up to $25,000 until we reach his $500,000 limit, which would result in $1 million in general unrestricted support for all teams and all athletes. So, just in case you are curious and inspired, we are in fact in need of donors for Frank to match in achieving this goal. Connected to this end, Katie Britton is our new Assistant Athletic Director for Development. She is here and is easy to spot, as many of you probably already have, as all have been teasing me that she has now taken over the distinction of being the tallest woman in the athletic department. And there she is. Only in athletics do we make these things competitive. In all seriousness, I want to thank Katie and also our alumni relations and development partners in their efforts of putting together this event tonight. Next year, the University of Chicago will field its first ever varsity women's lacrosse team. Kate Robinson, who is also here, was hired as our head coach in the spring. She is here and has been busy recruiting her first class of Maroon lacrosse players. I think Katie's superlative has become the most popular in the department because it's been amazing to see the number of prospects and parents that have come through her office in such a short amount of time, and it's just really exciting to see such interest in this new program. We also have a new partnership with Adidas as our department-wide provider for all teams. So our practice gear has come a long way since those basic gray John Normands, for those of you who know what I'm talking about. We also have a new Director of Athletic Communications, Nicole Watkins. For those of you following us on social media and perhaps have noticed terrific enhancements in that area, that's all Nicole. For those of you not following, start following. At least those of you who know what I'm talking about. And I want to thank Nicole and Nathan as well for their efforts in our graphics and video display that will proceed through the night. And Nicole is about to assist me in mentioning the last notable recent enhancement, our new Hall of Fame wall display in Ratner. We ran out of room for those large plaques, for those of you who are familiar, so a new installation has replaced them, and by design, will last us a good long time. Here is a look at it for those of you who may not make it into Ratner, so you can see it firsthand. Thank you. In the spirit of tonight's celebration, just wanted to mention a few other things. Last week was the 4th Aims of Athletics address. In the spirit of the Aims of Education address, the event is for our student athletes and our community to hear a perspective on the purpose and value sports has within our society. Alumna Jenny Costello-Fortner, also known as Tom Costello's sister, who apparently I have now learned goes by Tommy, according to Jenny. And I love this because I also have a brother, Tom, and I'm the only one who still calls him Tommy. So Tom Costello, where are you? You are Tommy from now on. That's it. Jenny was our keynote speaker. In addition to Jenny's role at Goldman Sachs, she dedicates enormous amounts of time to Special Olympics, a volunteering passion that was sparked through her WA involvement. Jenny's messages were inspirational and encouraging as she urged students to, quote, "Remember why you're here, find the joy, find your confidence, find the perspective," unquote. Perspective. It's one of those things that can easily recede into the background when we are consumed with our everyday stresses and the to-do lists, with so many people recently facing the reality of life and death between natural disasters and man-made ones. It's truly a blessing to come together tonight as a Maroon community to honor our champions and to reflect on this purposeful passion that we all share. Taking this moment to acknowledge being a part of something bigger than ourselves is a great way to find perspective. Tonight's Hall of Fame induction is a representation of our core values: excellence, education, and integrity. Our 2017 Hall of Fame inductees represent outstanding performance within the honorable traditions of Maroon athletics. Congratulations to all of you. As you know, they are Frank Edwards, class of 1974. Beth Marquardt Calderone, class of 2000. Joseph McCoy, class of 1994. Fred Speik, class of 1904. And Diane Trewin, class of 1971. I also want to take a moment to recognize some distinguished guests in attendance. We have other Hall of Fame members with us: Joe Bochensky, Derek Brooms, Jerry Clark, Ann Harvella, Mary Jean Mulvaney. Kelly Osler, and Patrick Sullivan is here tonight, who was inducted last year, but we were actually honoring him this year because he couldn't join us last year as it conflicted with his high school Hall of Fame. So he's just too much of a champion. But let's recognize our Hall of Famers who are here tonight. We have alumnus and university trustee Paul Jovovich, who's always so gracious to be here with us. We have the Graduate Order of the Sea President, Dennis Walden. And there are also selection committee members here, already mentioned, Joe Bochensky, Ann Harvilla, and Dennis Walden, but also here are Tommy Costello, Mike Hayes, Nathan Lindquist, and Beth Woods. It is now my pleasure to introduce Michelle Rasmussen. She is the Dean of Students in the university and leader of Campus and Student Life. Michelle has the distinction of overseeing athletics and recreation. She arrived about a month before I did in 2013. Michelle leads the Office of Campus and Student Life, which is dedicated to ensuring that students are prepared for academic, personal, and professional success through engagement in a rigorous, diverse, and creative community of learning. Please welcome Michelle Rasmussen.
Not quite as tall as Erin, so I will just lower this a bit. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. This has quickly become, over the years, one of my favorite events, and I'm so happy to be with you. I'd like to welcome all of you officially to our Athletics Hall of Fame dinner for 2017. And I particularly want to congratulate all of our newest inductees to the Athletics Hall of Fame, and to extend my appreciation to the friends and family members who have joined us here tonight. This is truly a wonderful opportunity for us to gather together and celebrate the very best of University of Chicago. Last week, as Erin mentioned, we had our annual Aims of Athletics event, and I had the great privilege and honor of meeting our keynote speaker, Jenny Fortner, a college alumna who played varsity basketball when she was with us. The Aims of Athletics event has become a signature event of Campus and Student Life and of the university in general, and it was inaugurated soon after Erin's arrival at the university. And it's really become a very important tradition for our student athletes and for all of those who support them and celebrate them. Meeting Jenny and hearing from her was, for me, really, really inspirational in a way that perhaps I was a bit surprised by. Not just because of her remarkable accomplishments as a student in the college and as a student athlete in particular, and also, of course, in her professional life since she's graduated, which has really been quite impressive, but also for what was so clearly her passion and dedication and advocacy for a cause that is so dear to her, the Special Olympics, with which she's been involved since she was a Maroon. Jenny is currently the co-chair of the Special Olympics 50th anniversary celebration, which will be taking place here in Chicago at Soldier Field in July of 2018. And as I sat last week in Mandel Hall and heard Jenny's story, and in particular, how much she attributes her success and her passion to her time at UChicago, I realized what an amazing inspiration she and all of you are to our current student athletes. At events like this, we rightly talk a lot in the abstract and highlight our values, our commitments, and our inspirations and aspirations. But when you meet someone like Jenny and hear her speak, you get to see these abstracted concepts in the flesh and understand truly what one person can achieve through their tenacity, their grit, their empathy, and their compassion. And I can't think of a better way, frankly, to showcase the role of Division III athletics in shaping these future leaders, philanthropists, and change agents. So as we prepare tonight to welcome our newest members to the Hall of Fame, I want to thank each of our inductees for their many, many contributions to intercollegiate athletics. You have excelled, you have achieved, and it's my hope and belief that you will inspire the current and future generations of Maroons onto greatness. Thank you all.
I failed to mention when we showed the wall, I just wanted to point out the awards that our inductees are receiving tonight is a new award, and it has all the elements of the new display wall, so it gives a little piece of the wall to take away. Patrick Sullivan, who was inducted last year and is receiving an award, is different than the others, so you'll just notice that when he comes up. So at this point, I am here to introduce our Master of Ceremonies, who will take us through the rest of the evening, and that is Lester Munson. Lester has served as Master of Ceremonies for all of our Hall of Fame inductions. He earned his JD from the University of Chicago Law School in 1967. After several years in politics and law, Lester entered the field of investigative and legal affairs reporting. He has served on the staffs of Sports Illustrated and ESPN, and he is a frequent commentator on NPR, PBS, and other broadcast outlets. Please, everyone, welcome Lester Munson.
Thank you, Aaron. Good evening, everybody. We gather tonight at a fascinating time, both in the world of sports and in the history of our university. Unfortunately, we must start tonight with the Chicago Cubs. That would be the Dodgers celebrating. The best way to summarize what happened to the Cubs this year was the headline in the Sun-Times this morning, and that headline said, "There's always last year." But as a lifetime Cub fan, I want to remind all of you that the Cubs have done exactly what the Cubs owner said he would do. He is Tom Ricketts. He is a member of the class of 1988 at this university, and he has an MBA from Booth in 1993. When he bought the Cubs with his siblings, he promised that the Cubs would be competitive, that they would be a serious contender each year, and that is exactly what has happened. The winning of the World Series last year was almost like a bonus, but for all of those of us who are Cub fans, that will remain one of the great things that we have experienced. I am still, even a year later, recovering from the 7th game of the World Series. Some of you may remember a journeyman ball player on the Cleveland Indians hit a home run off Aroldis Chapman late in the game. I was watching the game with my wife Judy, who is down here at the table. She is a member of the class of 1963. She saw what happened to me when he hit that home run, and she went to the phone to call 911. She thought I was having cardiac arrest. But here we all are. On the campus, we have a new Nobel Prize winner. We have some fascinating developments in the mathematics research of our president, Robert Zimmer. We have a little surprise in the ratings of universities that have come out in the last several weeks. And tomorrow, at the homecoming game, Sports Illustrated will be present to cover the game. Let's start with the new Nobel Prize winner. He is, of course, from the Department of Economics. His name is Richard Thaler. And there he is, happily acknowledging his Nobel Prize. At one point in the press conference, he pointed over to the side and he said to the reporters and to the camera crews, "See those guys over there? That's the president of the university, and that's the provost of the university. And this is the first time they have ever talked about me without using the phrase pain in the ass." Thaler invented behavioral economics. Behavioral economics began with a bowl of cashew nuts when he was a graduate student. He noticed that if the cashew nuts were at the other end of the room, people did not eat as many. And as he said at his press conference, some insight, huh? I've been studying stuff like that for years. One of his other cases that he wrote an article about was the Amsterdam airport men's room. In the men's room, somebody got the bright idea to put models of little flies in the urinals, and what happened? There was, as we say in his article, less spillage because the men saw the fly in the urinal. Now, if you want to sound literate and you want to sound like you know something about Thaler's work, the phrases that you use are confirmation bias. That means you believe what you want to believe. Another of his phrases is loss aversion, which means a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And then he also talks about endowment effect and choice architecture, which is something you see in a 401k plan. He is the holder of the Charles R. Walgreen Chair in Economics. He is the third man to hold that chair, and all three have won the Nobel Prize. Imagine the pressure on the next guy who will be appointed to that chair. What did Thaler say he was going to do with the money? He said, I will spend it as irrationally as possible. Now, in addition to Professor Thaler's Nobel Prize, there has been an historic breakthrough in the mathematics research and work of our president, Robert Zimmer. As a young professor, he did research on something called symmetries. It's a fundamental concept in mathematics. It's a significant factor in many mathematical questions. It involves ergodic theory and differential geometry. This is the only sports banquet in the history of America in which ergodic theory and differential geometry have been mentioned. What he did is he formulated what became known in mathematics as the Zimmer program. Many other young mathematicians have tried to advance his work. Now, last year, the end of 2016, 3 professors managed to put together research that did, in fact, advance President Zimmer's work. President Zimmer was so impressed that he brought them all here to the Quadrangle Club in Hyde Park and bought them lunch so that he could find out what they were doing. They have proved what was known as the Zimmer conjecture. Here is what the proof looks like. I'm going to give you the second step of the proof. Now, I know somewhere, this is the University of Chicago, somebody out there is a math major, and they're looking at this, and they're going to tell me there's more to the proof. Well, there is. There's 2 more pictures, but I'm sparing you those pictures. The Zimmer was very, as a mathematics genius, when somebody comes and advances what you have done, I could see how maybe he would be a little frustrated by that, and he would be unhappy that somebody has done something that he was unable to do. But in this case, he was delighted with these guys because 2 are professors here at our university, and the third is a former PhD student of President Zimmer. Now, it is always interesting to see how our university does in the ratings that are produced by journalistic organizations and other research groups. The magazine that started this is U.S. News, and it remains the arbiter of the rankings of all of our universities. Its ratings are based on academic excellence, graduation rates, faculty resources, and freshman retention rates. In U.S. News, we ranked 3rd tied with Yale. We were ahead of MIT, Stanford, Duke, Caltech, Dartmouth, and Hopkins. Our friends to the north at Northwestern were ranked 11th. Not to be outdone, the Wall Street Journal has begun ranking colleges and universities. It is an enormous undertaking. They actually surveyed 109,000 college students as part of their exercise. The criterion for the journal was how well a college prepares its students for life after graduation. There are 15 factors that they use in their equation. This is why it pays to have a math major as the president here at the University of Chicago. 40% of the journal's rating is for student outcomes, including graduate pay, 30% for academic resources, 20% student engagement, and 10% diversity of students and staff. It was a challenge for me just to add up those percentages to make sure that they came to 100%. But we have President Zimmer who can do these things for us. But the most puzzling of these rankings came in a magazine known as Washington Monthly. This is a magazine that is held in high esteem by journalists like me, particularly the Washington Press Corps. It has always had a following among journalists and among academics, and it now has begun to rank colleges and universities. Instead of relying on things like how many applications are rejected by the school, this survey gives credit for numbers of low-income students and the numbers of first-generation students, the first in their family to go to college. It also emphasizes preparation for public service. We, University of Chicago, did not come in the top 30 in this magazine. Only one local school was in the top 30, and that was the Illinois Institute of Technology. No University of Chicago, no Northwestern. The top 30 included schools like Utah State and Cal State Fresno. Now, I don't want to sound like a snob, but have you ever been to Fresno? If Cal State Fresno had a Hall of Fame like our Hall of Fame, its first class of inductees would include Jerry Tarkanian, the most corrupt basketball coach in the history of college basketball. Now, one final note on what's happening here on the campus. Sports Illustrated, one of my former employers, will be here tomorrow for the homecoming game. It is part of a program that the magazine runs called Monday Morning Quarterback. The guy who presides over this is Peter King, the great NFL writer of Sports Illustrated, and the series is called Football in America. They are examining questions that now pervade the sport of college football, including the safety of the players, concussions, and all of the difficulties that football is now facing. They spent the day today at Von Steuben High School. Von Steuben is a CPS school on the north side. Unlike other schools, it recently began a football program. It's not closing down a football program. So SI went to see what they were doing. They will be at our field tomorrow as we play Beloit in the homecoming game. It is interesting. Beloit, the opponent in the homecoming game, is 0-6. So congratulations to Aaron and the staff for lining up exactly the right homecoming opponent. And then they will go to the game in Soldier Field featuring the Chicago Bears on Sunday. Now, there is a shot of our field. You cannot see much of the turf there, but Sports Illustrated is going to find out tomorrow and Sunday that the turf on our field is better than the turf the Bears play on in Soldier Field. That is thanks to a major gift by Bernie Del Giorno, one of the friends of our athletic program. Now, as Aaron mentioned, this is the 15th gathering for induction of athletes into the Hall of Fame. When we are done tonight, we will have 124 athletes in the Hall of Fame. You saw a good look in the slides of what it looks like in the hall there at the Ratner Center. You should go over and see that. It's an inspiring and impressive array of athletic and academic excellence. Of the total, we have 28 from football, 26 from men's basketball, 25 from men's track and field. The women are beginning to catch up. We have now in the Hall of Fame 10 from women's basketball, 9 from softball. Tonight's class will have 2 from football, 1 from men's basketball, and 2 from softball. But we're going to start by recognizing a member of last year's class of inductees. He is Patrick Sullivan of the class of 2004. The video you are about to see is a remarkable piece of work. It is a tribute to Patrick from one of his competitive rivals during his career as a runner. His name is Dan McClain. He and Patrick dominated distance running competition during their years running with each other in Division III, and they competed against each other on a national level. I'll give you one example. In the national championship of their senior year, in the 1,500 meters, Patrick led. This is an indoor race. Patrick led into the final straightaway. He had 40 meters before he finished, and at that point, McClain passed him up and actually won the race. But they were only a meter or two apart, and this was an example of the kind of rivalry they had. Dan, the guy that you will see in the video, was willing to talk about his friendly rival, Patrick Sullivan, as part of his induction tonight. These guys are running the equivalent of a mile in 4 minutes and 12 seconds, just to give you an idea that these are elite runners competing at the highest level. Here is our inductee as described by a friendly rival.
Patrick Sullivan excelled as a runner for the University of Chicago's men's track and field and cross-country team. He earned first-team All-UAA distinction in cross-country 3 times during his career. On the track, his best event was the 1,500 meters, where he won 5 total UAA titles between the indoor and outdoor seasons. Sullivan held the UAA record in the outdoor 1,500 meters for 12 years. Nationally, he was a 3-time All-American in the 1,500 meters, including a 3rd-place finish at the 2004 Indoor National Meet. In the school records, Sullivan ranked 2nd in the outdoor 1,500 meters, the indoor 1 mile, and the indoor 3,000 meters. Congratulations to Patrick Sullivan, a member of the UChicago Athletics Hall of Fame Class 2017.
My name is Dan McClain, and I ran cross-country and track at the University of Puget Sound from 2000 through 2004. I first heard of Patrick Sullivan during my freshman track season. Patrick and I were the only 2 freshmen to qualify for nationals in the 1,500 that year, and we met at the welcome dinner the night before the national meet began. There was a bit of instant camaraderie in being the 2 younger guys that would be towing the line against older, more seasoned competitors. It also made for a bit of a race within the race, as we both wanted to beat as many people as possible, but we also especially wanted to beat each other since we were each other's most direct contemporary. We were both fortunate enough to qualify for the final, and Patrick ended up beating me by a couple of places. From then on, Patrick and I were friendly rivals. When I was back in Chicago for my sister's graduation a few weeks later, Patrick and I met up to go for a run. We did the same thing years later, the day after the indoor nationals, where I beat him by 1 place, and I was waiting to fly back to the West Coast. I think Patrick genuinely wanted me to do well, and I know I wanted him to be at his best too. I'm also pretty sure that we cared about beating each other just a little bit more than our other competitors. The rivalry was special to me because we were evenly matched and the outcome of each race was so uncertain. Every time I raced Patrick, I felt like I was capable of beating him, but I knew that he was equally capable of beating me. Patrick was such a tough and consistent racer, but the times I beat him meant a little bit more to me, and the times that he beat me served as a little extra motivation to try to be better the next time we raced. So, Patrick, congratulations on your Hall of Fame induction. I'm glad Chicago is taking the opportunity to honor you, and know that your competitors had a ton of respect for you and remember you as a big part of what made our own collegiate running experiences special.
One other example of Patrick's success, in a 3,000-meter race, he once lapped the competition. That means he went so far out in front that he came around behind the other runners. These are collegiate runners who are training the year round, and he lapped them. An amazing achievement in the world of track. Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Sullivan.
Dan did a great job. I have some notes. So first of all, I never expected to be inducted into any athletic halls of fame. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you to the school and the athletic department for accommodating that I wasn't able to be here last year. In my career, I ran much faster than I ever expected to, several times over. If you'd told me as a high schooler what I would eventually run, I would not have believed you. When I started running as a high school freshman, I remember watching the varsity athletes do workouts around the track. The workouts they were doing were unbelievably hard, and they were unfathomably fast. I could not believe it. I have a few minutes, they told me, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about one aspect of what it's like to be a runner. The racing part. There are lots of other parts. Most of the time is spent not racing, but racing is the crux of the sport, and it's by the athletes, it's simultaneously dreaded and revered. So I'm going to describe what it's like for me using two races throughout my college career as set pieces. Something that may have been a factor in my nomination was that I qualified for 10 consecutive national meets while I was at Chicago. I was a three-sport athlete, cross country, indoor, and outdoor track, so that meant there were 12 national meets to qualify for. I qualified for my first one, outdoor track, freshman year. That's where I met Dan. He was the other freshman who qualified for a distance event that year. I ran my qualifier for that race at the last chance meet of the season. It was at North Central College, and it was one of those races where everything just works out. My fitness, the race conditions, how the race unfolds, it all just came together, and I ran 4 seconds faster in that race than I had been running throughout the season. That got me my qualifier, that got me in. It also elevated me from one level of competition to the next level of competition. An aside, my coach at the time, Jim Spivey, said that a runner gets 7 perfect races in his career, and you remember all of them, and you feel amazing. It feels easy. You run faster than you think you can. Everything clicks, and it just feels easy. An aside for the aside, there's a curse associated with this. Because eventually there is going to be a race where you run, there's going to be one of these perfect races. You finish it, you think not only I am now this fast, I can run this fast, but you think I can run faster than this. You think this after every perfect race. You think I can run faster than this. Eventually there's going to be a time when you don't. You don't know it at the time. And so for every runner, there comes a time when you finish a race, you think this is great, this is wonderful, I can run faster than this, and then you never do. That's the curse of running and of the perfect race. But this race, qualifying for nationals freshman year, was one of my perfect races. The second race I want to talk about was very different. It was a qualifier for cross-country nationals my junior year. By that time, Coach Hall was the coach. Coach is laughing. He knows where this is going. The way qualifying works in cross-country is in track, you run a time, and you get on a list, and you get in. In cross-country, you show up for the race, the top 5 teams get in, and then at the time for this race, the rules were the top 5 teams and the top 5 individuals that were not on a team. This was not my day. This was not a perfect race. At 4 miles in the race, I was probably in 20th place or so, a couple of places out of that last individual qualifying spot. Coach had situated himself somewhere after the 4-mile mark, and he told me exactly how many places I needed to pick up to get that qualifier. I scowled at him and shook my head. I was thinking to myself at the time, if I don't catch those guys, I don't have to do this next week. Another aside. Let's remember that I was a miler. It has always seemed to me that there was a big difference in how middle distance races, like the 1500, the mile, and longer distance races unfolded. In the 1500, at least for me, other people may feel differently. The separation happens because there comes a time during the race when either you can't hold that pace anymore or you win. It's that simple, it's that decisive, it's that clean. In a longer race, say a 5K or a 5-mile cross-country race, it's a head game. There comes a time in the race when you can keep going, or you can go a little faster, but you really don't want to. This was that time. So I spent the next minute or so of the race wrestling my demons into submission about this, about whether I wanted to do this again next week or not. I'm sure my dad was at the race. My grandfather might have been at the race. This was in Peoria, Illinois. My parents live outside Chicago, so my teammates were there. Coach had counted on me. The school was behind me. Somewhere in the final straight, I decided that I should go for it. So I passed enough people. I might have even gotten up to that 4th qualifying spot. I was still a miler, after all. So that's the story. Where else, other than a Hall of Fame induction, do you get to be the hero of your own story? In running, there are ups and downs, good days and bad. Sometimes the stars align and you exceed your wildest expectations. In other races, you have to put your head down, beat back the demons, grind it out. Racing is alternately glorious and infuriating. So I need to thank a handful of people. My teammates, last year when I was at my high school, I didn't give remarks on stage, but I wrote an essay for the publication, and it was about debunking the myth of running being an individual sport. And so I'm not going to talk about that now, but I will say that the team is incredibly important, even in a sport where you race on your own. Coach Hall, Coach Spivey, the school for supporting athletics, supporting my career, for working to figure out the balance between academic excellence and athletic excellence. I'm a math major from Chicago. I knew it. I have no idea what was going on in that proof. My parents and family for all of the support that they gave me over the years. It was a wonderful career running. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Thank you.
That was terrific. I knew there was a math major. Probably some more, too. Our next inductee played for one of the great basketball teams in the history of this university, One member of that team, Jerry Clark, is already in the Hall of Fame. Another member of that team will be on the video that you see. The only real question is why Frank Edwards was not in the Hall of Fame earlier, but we have so many great athletes here, you have to take your turn. As you watch the video, please note that Frank has easily the best hair of anybody in the history of this athletic department. That has changed, by the way, as you will see in a little while. And as you watch the video, listen for the mention of one of the legendary Chicago sports writers. I'll give you his initials, Bill Gleason. Listen for that mention in this video about Frank Edwards, our next inductee.
Frank Edwards was one of the top scorers and rebounders to ever wear a University of Chicago men's basketball uniform. Over the course of his career at the forward position, Edwards averaged 18.1 points and 9 rebounds per game, while shooting just over 50% from the floor. In the UChicago men's basketball record books, Edwards ranks in the top 6 in 5 categories, including 3rd in field goals, 4th in scoring average, 5th in points, 5th in rebounds, and 6th in field goal percentage. At the time of his graduation in 1974, Edwards stood as the 2nd leading scorer with 1,303 points, a mark that stands 5th today. Edwards' teams compiled a stellar 54-20 record, and in his final 3 seasons, the Maroons won by an average of 15 points per contest. Congratulations to Frank Edwards, a member of the UChicago Athletics Hall of Fame class 2017.
Hi, I'm Jeff Sullivan. I was the point guard on a team that was fortunate enough to, I was able to share with Jerry the Shark Clark, who's already in the Athletic Hall of Fame, and Frank Hot Dog Edwards, who belatedly, and I say that seriously, he should have been inducted long ago, is now being inducted into the University of Chicago Hall of Fame. But I always remember when I first met Frank, he exuded confidence. He was an up guy. I don't know that I ever saw Frank upset, unhappy, always positive, both in his personal life and as a teammate on the University of Chicago basketball team. And we met our first day in practice. We came to practice, and Frank, coming from the south side of Chicago and playing in the city leagues and playing for De La Salle High School, and kind of a Johnny-come-lately to basketball, organized basketball. You know, we're raring to go and run up and down the court, and of course Joe Stamp had us in front of a blackboard so he could spend 30 or 40 minutes talking about his philosophy and the offense and so on and so forth. And Frank's thinking, you know, oh man, what's this all about? And we get out and we practice and we play. And we get to the first game of the season, and it's Roosevelt. And I don't remember if Frank started or he got put in right away, but he started playing early, and a lot of people don't realize he started even before Jerry the Shark Clark got a starting role. And we were playing Roosevelt, and he thought that they were just going to run us off the court. And we methodically, through Joe Stamp's motion offense and the way he set up the defense, just methodically broke them down to the point where we obviously won the game. And the headlines the next day, probably in the Sun-Times, because they covered us quite well with Bill Gleason, is Maroons rock Roosevelt and Edwards paces win. And I think Frank was a converted disciple of Joe Stamp from that day forward. Frank was the heart and soul of University of Chicago basketball during those 4 years. I mean, Jerry was deadly from the outside, but Frank controlled the middle. And from 15 feet in, he was deadly. He created the identity of our team. We were tough defensively, we were tough offensively, we gave no quarter. And who better to lead that than an undersized forward at 6'4" that rebounded and scored the way he did. In addition, he brought an attitude to the court that was easy for us all to adopt. There was never any give. If we lost a game, quite frankly, we figured we just ran out of time. It was rare for us to admit that or accept that we'd been defeated. We just figured there's just a little more time on the clock, it would have been a different result. And when you consider his accomplishments that were made in career statistics over a 74-game career, it still stands the test of time, even though the more modern players get to play like we would have liked to, 28, 30 games a year. And he certainly is deserving of this award and this honor that's being bestowed upon him.
These guys playing in the early 70s literally changed the culture of basketball at this university. They elevated the basketball program to a height that had never before been seen. Since then, Frank has worked as a criminal defense lawyer here in Chicago, a big guy fighting for the little guy on a daily basis at 26th in California and other courthouses in Cook County. He knows how the criminal justice system works, and more importantly, he also knows how it fails to work. He also has become a single parent at the age of 65, and he is now trying to keep up with his brother's 16-year-old son. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Edwards.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming, especially my teammates, Jeff from Utah, Jerry comes from Texas, my teammate Tony Barrett, Senator Carol Mosley Braun, an ambassador who's been my lifelong friend, my nephew, KJ, my two brothers, who in the days when we played in that big open field house with a clay floor, and we had to come out and clean the floor every day, and sometimes even at halftime of the game because so much dust would settle. My best friend, Michael, who I've been with since I was, 6 years old? And my girl, Gail King, who I'm a maroon, but she's an ultra maroon. And it's a great honor, because University of Chicago, I was a kid from a blue-collar Southside high school. And I came to University of Chicago, and I found that genius was a common virtue among the professors and the students. And it was an eye-opening experience. And the University of Chicago enabled me to live an unconventional life. It gave me the intellectual and moral compass that allowed me to do things that I couldn't have imagined. And I think I should give you some of my curriculum vitae of the jobs that I've been paid for, okay? I've been a paper boy. I sold Christmas cards. I've been a shoe salesman, a landscaper, a dog walker, a clothing salesman, a disc jockey, a waiter, a cashier. I've been a construction laborer, a short order cook, an usher, a spotlight operator at a Calypso concert. I've done maintenance. I've been a delivery man, a house painter, a lifeguard, a sound engineer, a referee in track and field, basketball, football, softball, baseball. I've been a chauffeur, a bodyguard, a scuba instructor. I worked on the railroad as a motorman, conductor, an engineer, flagman, towerman. And when I was in law school, I was an intern, an extern. Extern means you don't get paid. After law school, I was a longshoreman in Miami. I loaded ships. I've been a legal researcher. I was Carol Mosley Braun's campaign manager in 1980 when she was a state representative. And yes, because of her, we won. And I don't need to tell you that she went on to be an ambassador and United States Senator and one of my greatest friends. I was a legal researcher. I've been a law clerk in the federal court, state court. I was a prosecutor, assistant state's attorney, defense attorney. I've been a circuit court judge, and now I'm a defense attorney again. And I fight for the little guy. My parents were people that fled the South and fled Jim Crow America to come. And my dad was a Tuskegee Airman who fought for this country in World War II. And natural disasters seem to follow me around. I've been in a house fire, I've been in an earthquake, I've been in a volcano. Tornado destroyed my house when I was 14. Been an earthquake. And the thing about the first practice, I'll never forget. When I saw Coach Joseph Stamp, I said to myself, what is this old man going to teach me about basketball? I was an 18-year-old, I was full of myself, okay? And the answer to that question turns out to be everything. And just as Jeff said in the video, when we played Roosevelt, the first game, I got to start my first game as a freshman. And the guys on Roosevelt were guys I had played with around in Chicago, and they were like dunking and in the warm-ups, and you could dunk in those days. And I remember turning to my teammates and going, we're going to get our tails whipped tonight. But as Jeff said, Coach Stamp had a plan. And we spread these guys out. And as he said, the next morning when I woke up and I read the headlines and it said, Maroons rock Roosevelt. Edwards paces romp. I went, I'm in. And so I had lunch with Coach McGrath a couple of months ago. And I told him, all of you people understand that when you play for a university, when you wear those colors, when you go into battle, when you give your blood, sweat, and tears for the university, when other students are sleeping in and doing their homework and you're at practice and you're getting up on Saturday and you're working on Sunday, you have more of a connection with that university than the average student. And these students are going to be successful. They're University of Chicago graduates. So, are you telling me we can't go to Division I? We can't beat Northwestern or Harvard? Yes, we can. And as I said, we played in this old field house with a clay floor, you know, and my two brothers used to run around and the shot put pit and the track, okay? And things have come a long way. But we can do better. The University of Chicago is a genius institution. It's a place where genius is respected. And there can be genius in athletics as well as intellectual pursuit. So my father came to every game I played in as a college student and as a high school student. All my teammates will know he rode the bus. Him and Coach Stamp became great friends. And in fact, on more than one occasion, because we were riding in what would be called a school bus today, very little heat, very bouncy, the bus broke down on at least two occasions when we were on the way to a game. And my father, having been a Tuskegee Airman, he was a crew chief. He fixed P-51 Mustangs. He actually fixed the bus. And we were late for a couple of games, okay? So the Coach Stamp was like a second father to me. I mean, he was one of the greatest men next to my father I ever knew. And you know, some people in this day and age, they claim this ostentatious Christianity, where Coach Stamp lived it. He was compassionate. He was kind. He was generous. His goodness was almost something that when I first met him, I was a little suspicious. I was like, nobody can be this really nice. Nobody can be this good. But it turns out, yeah, he was. He told us, and Jerry reminded me of this last night, when you die, your elbows don't work anymore. And the difference between heaven and hell is, in hell, everyone's trying to eat what they can. And in heaven, everybody's feeding each other. And that was the kind of man Coach Stamp was. He taught us that character, you know, not just talent, is what makes you. It's what defines you. He was teaching more than just X's and O's, you know, character, kindness, generosity of spirit. Those are the things that he was about. And, you know, today, because of that, you know, my daily life encompasses all humanity. I have, on a daily basis, I encounter Puerto Ricans and Muslims and Christians and Croatians and Jews and Catholics. And this is what makes the United States of America the greatest country in the world. This is the country my father fought for, and that generation of World War II patriots fought for. And just as the University of Chicago, same with the United States of America, it's ideas that make us great. It's not blood or soil, it's ideas, freedom, justice, tolerance. It's what makes us great. This is why we are the greatest nation in the world. And I rail against the status quo because I fight for the little guy every day. I'm a criminal defense attorney. And when you face the power of the government, federal or state, it's a mismatch. So it's only guys like me that stand between that awesome power and the individual. So I believe today my father and Coach Stamp would be very proud of what's happened here today. They'd remember my teammates that are here as well as the ones that aren't. Sherwin Waldman, Vukman Borisic, and Edward Wilkerson, and Norville Brown, who we met last night. And we received lots of plaques and awards over those years. And the only thing I have left, because I've been in a fire, a flood, a tornado, an earthquake, volcano, I've lost a lot of things over time. I've had a ruptured appendix. I've been in a near-death coma. I've had a near-death experience. But this is the only thing I have left from those years. And it's a plaque that Coach Stamp gave to my father in our senior year. And it says, U of C, 7374, Frank Edwards Sr., travel engineer. And despite myself, despite the little arrogant, self-centered person I was, when I had that near-death experience, I understood that the only thing that counts in this life is those people that you love and the people that love you. And Coach and my father both taught me, even though against my own particular sensibilities, that in sports and in life, it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game.
As you watch the video of our next inductee, listen carefully as two of her teammates discuss her exploits as a softball pitcher. She struck out 535 hitters in 475 innings. She pitched 17 shutouts. If the Chicago Cubs had somebody half as good, we would be getting ready to play the Dodgers tomorrow night again. This is the second great pitcher, softball pitcher, that we have brought into the Hall of Fame. The first one you're going to see in the video, Kelly Osler. As Aaron mentioned, I have been involved in each one of these induction ceremonies. The statistics, the achievements as measured in sports metrics of this group is always impressive. But Kelly Osler's statistics as a pitcher are beyond anything I have ever seen. She will be one of the people you see talking about Beth Marquardt Calderone in this video.
Beth Marquardt Calderone was a potent dual threat as a hitter and pitcher for the UChicago softball team in the late 1990s and early 2000s. A three-time All-Region selection, she ranks in the program's top 10 in a whopping 12 categories and still stands as the program's all-time leader with 42 career doubles. Other notable categories include ranking second with 173 hits and 11 triples. In the pitcher's circle, she compiled a formidable 47 career victories, including 17 shutouts, while striking out 535 batters, a mark that still stands third all-time in Chicago softball history. As a freshman, she was named the UAA's most valuable player and during her senior campaign helped lead the Maroons to the NCAA Division III Regional. Congratulations to Beth Marquardt Calderone, a member of the UChicago Athletics Hall of Fame Class 2017.
Kansas.
Beth.
Beoth.
Bayos.
The mighty Bayos.
Chachi.
Joni loves Chachi.
My first memory of Beth happened even before I met her. I was looking at colleges with my dad, and we came to a game in Hyde Park to see if the nerdy people at the University of Chicago could actually play softball. I knew within the first 5 warm-up pitches, with Beth on the mound and Aaron Sloan behind the plate, that the girls could play.
I was there too. Did you remember me?
No, sorry.
Of course not. Well, what can I say about the magnificent Beth? As her maid of shamefulness, I may have some more colorful stories. Not my first memory of Beth, but one of my favorites is the genesis of Self and Cabana Boy. We went to a wild game party held at Chris's fraternity. We sat in that little cubby for hours, bent over with laughter, as we conjured the life story of a septuagenarian seafarer.
Of course you did. Typical frat party. So let's bring it back to softball. On the field, Beth was a workhorse all 4 years. And her second year, she was the lone pitcher on staff. But the story that I think sums up her fighting spirit came from a weekend her senior year at Illinois Wesleyan. She was so sick, but she refused to sit out of the game. And she would go out and pitch, come back into the dugout between innings, throw up in the trash can, sorry about your dinners, and head out and hit again. And she did it all game long. She was truly a fierce competitor.
Another example of her competitive spirit is clear to anyone who faced her in the batting cages or during batting practice on the field. For instance, her teammates. Whenever she threw batting practice, she scared the batters by brushing us off the plate.
Owning the plate.
By hitting us. She also gave me a concussion at one point, but that's unrelated.
Beyond pitching, Beth was a phenomenal infielder and a clutch hitter. She was one of the most consistent players to ever wear maroon.
Another point of pride with her competitive nature, her one-upsmanship when comparing lower back scars.
I also recall a very intense and awkward game of Yahtzee. I sure hope she won.
So at this point, Beth is probably very, very regretful about inviting us to introduce her for this Hall of Fame award, but you get what you pay for. And on that note, congratulations, Beth, on this amazing achievement. It is both well-deserved and overdue.
We'd also like to thank the Hall of Fame committee for enabling us a bonus Beth weekend at the Cat Ranch. All of that time playing together forged not only an appreciation of her softball abilities, but also gave us another sister for life.
We love you, Beth!
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Amy. We're going to have to sign them up for next year's videos. Ladies and gentlemen, Beth Marquardt Calderone.
I don't know how you compete with that. Thank you. Thank you to the university, to President Zimmer, to Director of Athletics Aaron McDermott, distinguished guests from the university, the Hall of Fame Selection Committee for this tremendous honor. It's going to be hard for me not to be emotional. As you see, two of my very closest friends. I can't even. I also want to thank Coach Ruth Kamak, who never coached me. She invited me to campus when I was 18 or 17 or something, and then she left for 4 years. And then she came back. But thank you for inspiring me that Division III softball was in the cards for me. I've deeply admired the program you've built since I've left, and I continue to be inspired by the young athletes on the softball field. I brought my family to one down in Decorah, Iowa, last spring, and got to have my 4-year-old daughter watch the team play in the NCAAs. So it was a really exciting experience for us. Thank you to my coach, who is not here tonight, but Coach Michelle Hawkins coached me for 3 years, and she came from a dominating career at Northwestern as a Division I pitcher, and she taught me to be the dominating figure on the mound and at the plate, and very unapologetically. And she demanded regular 6 a.m. practices, as Kelly will remember, and our catchers as well, which at the time seemed outrageous, but now that I have 2 little ones, that's a shout out to you, Simon and Francis, 6 a.m. sounds really awesome, to tell you the truth. And thank you, of course, to my teammates, some of whom, as you know, are here. Meg Wellahan is also off in the corner. Love you, Meg. And Kelly and Amy, words are never enough. Thank you. They're never enough. Also in the Osler family, I'd like to thank Papa, Ray Osler, who acted as my surrogate dad through a couple years and took me out to dinners and mended to my wounds in various ways. And also his superfan compatriot, the esteemed Professor Dennis J. Hutchinson, who wears black and will travel to softball games a lot. He was sort of my spirit animal at Chicago. I never had him in class, but somehow he showed up on the sidelines to watch me pitch. His advice and guidance, especially my 3rd and 4th year at the university, were invaluable, and he assured me he would have been here, but for a prior engagement at Columbia where he's talking about the Supreme Court or something, I don't know. And I haven't decided yet if I'm gonna forgive him or not. To my parents, my dad, who couldn't be here because he's still recovering from a trip to Germany, Oktoberfest. But my mom, she is here, my mom Jody, still made the trip from Seattle. And despite my best efforts to downplay this, she wouldn't have missed it for the world. So she bought some plane tickets last week. She was my first coach, my best role model as an athlete, as a reader, as a learner, as a citizen, an activist. You should see her on Facebook. I try not to. A high school teacher, I couldn't escape that destiny. As a wife, as a mother, and most importantly, a role model as a woman. The fiercer defender of me and all other girls to play as hard and as dirty as any of the boys. Thank you. The story goes, although I'm not so sure anymore how true it is, isn't that always the way with stories, right? That I wasn't going to college to play sports, hence the University of Chicago. I played a lot of different sports growing up in Kansas, but I was ready to start fresh and redefine myself as a scholar among the gargoyles. And my first year, fall quarter, it was rough. It was a cliche, right, of every freshman who shows up. And I found myself entirely out of my depth. I was no longer the big fish in the small pond, and I quickly realized I hadn't read Madame Bovary in the French in high school, as some of my other humanities classmates had. And I wanted to kill myself rather than read that book. And I still wonder what happened to Emma at the end. No. I also had that classic moment of getting my first D on a chemistry test. I had lost all my confidence. But two things happened that fall, 21 years ago. One is that I met a chemistry major who lived in my dorm. And then we went to a Cubs game. And we've been married for 17 years. So thank you, Chris. Yeah. And number two, even though Ruth was gone, I decided to join that softball team. And I regained my confidence. Softball and the family of female athletes who surrounded it anchored me for 4 years. I could be who I was, but it's kind of socially unacceptable to be. My dad and my grandma would be appalled. Away from the field if I acted this way. I was arrogant. I was self-assured. I was maybe a bit evil. You think those balls came out of my hand on purpose. They didn't. They didn't. But it was probably because of this anchor that the confidence that this sport and my teammates and all those morning practices at Henry Crown is probably that anchor that gave me the confidence back in the classroom as well. I spent 4 years not worrying about what's next. Medicine or law, right? I didn't. I was able to explore. I had interests that didn't have any bounds. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I kept exploring at the Oriental Institute, at the Field Museum, at the Smithsonian, thanks to fellowships that I received through the university. I read a lot of Latin. I spent a quarter in Rome. I traveled. And this little Kansas girl ended her college athletic career on a cold spring day in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And it was the year 2000, and it was the first time our Chicago softball program had made the NCAA tournament, something I was incredibly proud of in the 4 years that I was part of that program. Thanks. I will tell you, Papa Osler was there. He knows. I've never cried quite as hard as I did on that final out. And those emotions are flooding back tonight. I'm so grateful for this honor, and I'm tremendously pleased to be here tonight. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Beth is not the only one whose romance started at Wrigley Field. The aforesaid Tom Ricketts, an authentic billionaire, gradually becoming perhaps the greatest owner of a professional sports team in the history of the Chicago market. He met his wife in the bleachers at Wrigley Field. He likes to go around as he gives his speeches for the Cubs saying, "I met my wife in the bleachers in Wrigley Field." When they went to the White House last year at the invitation of President Obama, by the way, a White Sox fan, but Michelle is a Cub fan. That's why they were there. When they went to the White House, President Obama noted that the Ricketts met in the bleachers, and they've been married for 30 years, and that's 30 years longer than most romances that begin in the bleachers of Wrigley Field. Our next inductee Joseph McCoy played quarterback for a terrific football team over a period of years. His running mate was Frank Baker, the trustee of the university whom Aaron mentioned a little earlier. Judy and I, in the course of our life together, have enjoyed season tickets to the Chicago Bears. We saw Gale Sayers run in Wrigley Field. We saw Walter Payton run in Soldier Field. While our son was playing football here, class of '89, we saw Bruce Montella set records as a running back for the Maroons. But as you watch this video, notice what Joseph McCoy accomplished as a runner. 6 yards per carry. Neither Sayers nor Payton nor Montella came close to that. Listen now to the video on Joseph McCoy, our next inductee.
Joseph McCoy put together a standout career at quarterback in the early 1990s, sharing the backfield with fellow UChicago Hall of Famer Frank Baker to form the top running duo of the modern era. The ground attack peaked in 1993, with McCoy setting new school records with 6.6 yards per carry and 16 rushing touchdowns. A 4-time All-UAA honoree, McCoy garnered first-team honors in 1992 following his junior campaign. Today, McCoy ranks second all-time with 31 career rushing touchdowns, third with 2,842 rushing yards, and first all-time after averaging 5.1 yards per carry during his career. A 3-sport athlete, McCoy also lettered in basketball and track and field for the Maroon. Congratulations to Joseph McCoy, a member of the UChicago Athletics Hall of Fame Class 2017.
For me, it's both an honor and a privilege to introduce Joseph McCoy, my teammate, as an inductee for this year's class. I first met Joseph during a recruiting visit as a senior in high school. And I remember thinking, hey, here's a guy that I really want to be connected with. Little did I know how true that would be over the next 25 years. Joseph, you are quite literally the best leader and the best teammate I've ever had the privilege to play with. During our years playing together, I learned valuable lessons, not only about how to compete, but also how to live. With regards to competition, one of the more important lessons that I learned was that you have to show up every day. And I remember during my first year on campus, I watched your practice habits, watched the way you competed. And one of the things that I realized was that every time we stepped on the field, you showed up to compete. And in fact, that was so evident that I could see it in our opponent's preparation in trying to stop you. Second, critical lesson I learned from you was to make no excuses. And that's a lesson that I've taken not only into my own life, but it also informs the way that I teach and the way that I coach and work with young people. You didn't allow us to make any excuses for the conditions that we played, for the resources that we didn't have, or the competition that we might have faced. You demanded that we give our best efforts every time. And third, which I think is even more important, and it relates to the previous two, is that you set a standard for excellence that all of us wanted to aspire to accomplish every time we had the opportunity. As I think about what I accomplished during my playing career at UFC, it is without a shadow of a doubt directly attributable to your leadership, your guidance, and your support. I've appreciated you not only from our first meeting, but in every opportunity that we've had to be connected since then. I remember the last game that you played in. We played against Case Western Reserve University right at Stagg Field. And I had the honor to clean your shoes for our annual shoe ceremony. And I remember as I cleaned your shoes, I wanted to shine him up the best that I could so that every Case Western defender could see the bottom of your shoes as you raced past him to lead us to victory. You had a stellar game that day. You ran for over 200 yards. You scored 3 touchdowns. And even more importantly, you led our team to victory. Joseph, I join so many others today as we come to celebrate you and the rest of the inductees on the accomplishments that you achieved during your playing career and the contributions that you've made not only to our teams, but to our lives. Thank you.
Joseph is a graduate of the Northwestern University School of Law. He is with the firm of Riley, Safer, Holmes, and Cancillo, where he specializes in complex real estate transactions and other corporate matters. He is so efficient and so well organized that his membership in this Hall of Fame is already up on the law firm website. Ladies and gentlemen, Joseph McCoy.
Good evening. This is an incredible moment for me. I'd like to thank the selection committee, University of Chicago, congratulate the other inductees this evening, thank my teammates that are here. Special thanks to Derek. That's two-time Player of the Year, Derek Brooms. So we have competing interests this evening. My wife told me to keep it short. My 9-year-old wrote this speech for me. So I'm going to read the most important part of the speech from my 9-year-old, which says, I want to thank my wonderful children, Quentin and Jordan. So let's give them a hand. So as we walked in, one of my cousins pulled me to the side and said, I never knew you played football. She said, how's it possible that we didn't know you played football? And I said, I don't know. I guess I never really talk about it 23 years later. But I never expected to be here, in all honesty. I still remember the day that I called my father. Back then, it's a little bit of an older crowd, so most of you in the room probably remember the rotary phones. The young kids, my nieces and nephews, have no idea what those are. But I called my father, who was at work, and I said, I decided where I'm going to school. And I said, I'm going to the University of Dallas, and I'm going to play basketball for Coach Bethany. I remember it like it was yesterday. And on the other end of the phone, my father said, son, that's a poor decision. And he hung up the phone. When I came on my visit, and for those of you who don't know, I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and it doesn't get cold in Arkansas like it does here in Chicago. And when I came in on my visit, it was like nothing I had ever experienced. I don't know why they had me come up at the end of the football season, which is basically winter in Chicago. And so when I got home, my friend said, well, what do you think? And I said, I'm not going to school in Chicago. It's freezing there. So I never imagined that I would end up in Chicago or at the University of Chicago. And earlier we talked about stats on the school and its place in the rankings Fortunately for me, my father, who ironically didn't go to Cal State Fresno, but did go to Cal State Dominguez Hills, and my mother, who went to Cal State Los Angeles, had the knowledge to steer me to the University of Chicago. And as I look back 27 years later, I could not be more thankful for having them in my life at that time to help guide and direct me and to be here with you all tonight. So, one acknowledgement, and then we're going to make several acknowledgments if you bear with me. One person who's not here with us tonight, who hasn't been with us for the last 26 years, who I hope is watching down this evening, my Uncle Jay, Herbert McCoy. He never got to see me play football in college, and he passed away when I was a freshman. And it's been a void in my life since 1990. Whenever I had challenges when I was growing up, sometimes you need to get away. My nieces and nephews know what that's all about. I would go to my Uncle Jay's house, and he would just sit there, and he would talk to me, and he'd send me back home. But I miss him, and I hope that tonight he's looking down and that he's smiling. Because what this really is, for me this evening, is a celebration of our family. And our family goes all the way back in this room to friends that I've had since I was 10 years old. And this is not my success. This is our success. And we will continue to build on our success as a family. And if you guys will indulge with me for a moment, I just want to recognize three of my very best friends from Little Rock, Arkansas, Michael, Katis, and Gary Rideout. Thank you for being here this evening. My Uncle Jay's wife and my number one cousin, my Aunt Emma and LaTanya. As was mentioned, I am a practicing lawyer. I've been practicing law for 19 years. For 16 of those years, I say this woman has raised me up in the profession. Melissa has been by my side as my assistant through, I don't know how many firms we've been at, but we've been at one or two, and she's still putting up with me 16 years later. So Melissa and Michael, thank you for being here. My cousin Peter, thank you for being here. Several years ago, 12 to be exact, I married a wonderful, wonderful woman. And with that marriage brought to my mother and father-in-law who are with us this evening, Paul and Dale Moss, thank you. To my DeSumo family, my brother Quan, my sister Jamar, my nephew, number one player in the state of Illinois, high school basketball. Anybody that's not an Illini fan, you need to become an Illini fan. Because last night he announced that Illinois basketball is back. Young Ayo DeSumo. My nieces, Khadija and Jossie. My other brother and sister, Marno, Mutia Williams, thank you for being here. One of my closest friends from college, who you put math formulas up there, she used to make me read her papers about polymers. I still can't really tell you what a polymer is, but she was a chemistry major, and I guess part of my indoctrination at the University of Chicago was to read her papers because she told me to. So, Christine Edmund Brooms, thank you for being here. Obviously, I mentioned Derek, who is a brother for life. To my sister, Lydia, her husband, Corey, my brother, Matthew, who traveled from Nashville. We got Little Rock, Nashville, Knoxville, California, Marietta, all with us this evening. And to the final thank yous, my parents, BJ and Eddie McCoy, thank you for everything. To my number one, my number two, Quentin Joseph and Jordan. Nothing better, except for your mama, my beautiful wife, Jaminda. So, as I said, this is not my success. This is our success. From Little Rock, Arkansas to Chicago, Illinois. 27 years and counting. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. For our next inductee, we go back in history for another football player, a member of the great powerhouse teams of Amos Alonzo Stagg. Fred Speik was a consensus All-American. We've had only 10 of those in the history of our university, and one of the historic players, along with Walter Eckersall, Jay Berwanger, and others who are in this Hall of Fame. It is that history, I think, that brought Sports Illustrated to our game tomorrow. They are interested in the whole narrative of football at this university. But now, the video highlights on Fred Speik.
Fred Speik was one of the first All-Americans in UChicago football history. Alongside teammate Walter Eckersall, Speik garnered consensus All-American honors as a senior in 1904, becoming one of 10 consensus All-Americans in University of Chicago football history. Speik played for legendary head coach Amos Alonzo Stagg, and the Maroons compiled a 34-9-4 record over his 4 years, boasting a winning percentage of nearly 77%. After graduation, Speik served as an assistant coach for Stagg from 1905 to 1907 before taking over as the head football coach at Purdue University, where he guided the Boilermakers during the 1908 and 1909 campaigns. Congratulations to Fred Speik, a member of the UChicago Athletics Hall of Fame Class 2017.
Accepting for Fred Speik will be his grandson, James Linden.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Linden. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. Fred Speik was my mother's father, and he has one son who's still alive, who's 91 years old, who tipped me off to this celebration, and I was intending to come, and he said he was going to come, and then at the last moment decided not to, largely because his wife died a month and a half ago. And so he deputized me to represent his progeny, which are the Blaylocks, the Lindens, and the Speiks. And I'm extraordinarily proud of him. He played football when it was probably at its most violent, except maybe today it's just as violent. But most of them do not wear helmets, and in the year 2005, 18 players died, and the presidents of Harvard and Yale wanted to disband football. And Teddy Roosevelt was the president at the time, and he so enjoyed football that he got them to change the rules and teams to wear helmets and stop hitting one another in the piles would form when it was kind of like a version of rugby. And it wasn't mentioned in the video, but he was assistant coach underneath Amos Alonzo Stagg in 1905, which was one of 2 times where the Maroons were national champs. And they played big-time football back then. They were in the Big Ten, and that is why winners of Big Ten championships received the Amos Alonzo Stagg Cup. He was kind of in the horns of a dilemma as to whether or not to be a coach or to be a doctor. And so he hedged his bets. He went to Rush Medical School, and he was assistant coach to Amos Alonzo Stagg. And Stagg turned him loose and helped him get a job at Purdue, and he failed abysmally at it. And so he took his wife and went out to Southern California and became a very well-known doctor out there. He had 5 kids. The oldest one, Frederick, died at age 14, and the other 4, 2 of them went to the University of Chicago of the West, Stanford, and the other 2 went to Pomona. We're very, very proud of our, I guess he's my grandfather, but we're just proud of a man that was elegant, handsome, a gentleman, but he knew how to slug in the pile-ups. So I'm thoroughly impressed with this ceremony and what's going on here. And my congratulations go out to all of the recipients of the awards before me and to Diane after me. And I want to thank Katie Britton and Joe Bochensky and the selection committee for reaching way back 113 years to designate my grandfather as a deserving recipient of this award. It's totally impressive, and thank you very much for listening to me, and have a good evening.
Our next inductee was a pioneer as women's sports began to develop on our campus. She starred in 4 sports, something that would be almost impossible to conceive of today. But pay attention in the video to what she was able to do as the catcher on the softball team. She was an early version of what we now know as Wilson Contreras, the strong-armed catcher of the Chicago Cubs. She surprised many base runners who are attempting to steal bases on her. Here is the video on Diane Trewin.
Diane Trewin was one of the groundbreaking athletes during the first years of women's intercollegiate athletics at UChicago in the early 1960s and 1970s. As an undergraduate, she was a 4-year starter in 4 sports: softball, basketball, volleyball, and badminton. Trewin particularly excelled on the softball diamond, entering the program in its inaugural season under Hall of Fame head coach Pat Kirby in 1968. She served as the team's natural leader at catcher, where she cut down runners on the base pass with a top-notch arm and had reflexive ability to block and corral errant pitches. At the plate, she displayed superior bat control combined with extra base power for the Maroons. Congratulations to Diane Trewin, a member of the UChicago Athletics Hall of Fame class of 2017.
For an athletic program to grow and excel, you need great leadership, great coaching, and great athletes. In the early years of women's intercollegiate athletics, even before the passage of Title IX, it was Chicago's great fortune to have Hall of Fame administrator Mary Jean Mulvaney, Hall of Fame coach Pat Kirby, and newly minted Hall of Fame athlete Diane Trewin. Diane arrived on campus 50 years ago when the women's intercollegiate athletic program was in its early stages of development. When I arrived 2 years later, a strong foundation had been established, and Diane's contributions were key in that development. A four-sport athlete, she helped attract other students to the program with the strength of her athletic ability and her love of sports. Many of us in that era came to college athletics with passion and athleticism, but without competitive experience or a background of quality, or for that matter, any coaching. Nationally, the opportunity for girls to compete in high school athletics ranged from non-existent to limited, to very reputable programming. As a softball player, Diane was special and unique because she came from a highly competitive high school softball program in Iowa. It is regrettable that we do not have records from Diane's Chicago career, but I would like to share some statistics from her high school career that will demonstrate her skill. 50 years after graduating, sorry Diane that I keep saying that, she is still in the North Fayette, Iowa record book in 5 categories. For her single season performances, she is second in batting average with a .556 average and third in triples. For her career, she is ranked second in RBIs and fifth in career batting average and runs scored. All remarkable statistics that have stood the test of time. 50 years in case you weren't paying attention. In the late 60s and 70s, we usually played on fields without outfield fences. One of my many Diane memories is her trotting around the bases as some hapless outfielder desperately tried to chase down one of Diane's shots that had sailed far over her head. As an inexperienced pitcher, it was a joy and a relief to have Diane behind the plate. These same fields that did not have outfield fences also did not have regulation backstops. She saved what would have been countless wild pitches and gave me the confidence to continue to work on my skills. Diane had a great arm, but our middle infield was not always as fast as they should have been covering second base. Despite this, Diane had such a great arm that she could double pump and still throw out a runner attempting to steal second. Pam Foss Williams, who caught my errant throws after Diane's graduation, had this to say about Diane. She had remarkable poise, an incredible knowledge of the game, and an equally incredible arm. As is common with many catchers, she was the natural leader of the team. She calmed down the pitchers, she made sure the infield knew where the next play was, and she moved the outfield as needed. I could never have had a better teacher. Diane Trewin made all of us better and helped make Chicago an early leader in women's athletics. Thank you, Diane, and congratulations on this well-deserved honor.
Diane earned a master's degree at Brown University in 1972. She spent most of her working career managing disability programs for the Social Security Administration. She was in charge of the program in the San Francisco region and has lived there for quite a while. She has traveled all over the world. When she retired, she began taking piano lessons. She learned, however, that she was not an undiscovered piano prodigy. And she wants us to know that her piano teacher is very patient. Ladies and gentlemen, a fitting finale to our induction of 2017, Diane Trewin.
Thank you so much. I'm honored and humbled by this award. I came to the university from a small family farm in Iowa. I was one of Margaret Perry's grassroots talent search students. For any of you who aren't familiar with the program, in the early 1960s, Margaret Perry began visiting rural areas to find young prospects who might have never considered the University of Chicago as a potential college for them. She let us know that not only would we be considered for this great university, but that the college very much wanted us. I've always been ready for an adventure, and what an opportunity this provided. Not that I really knew that much about the university, really just that it was a great institution of higher learning. Mind you, at the time I finished high school, I had barely been outside my little corner in far northeast Iowa. I'd been to southeastern Minnesota and southwestern Wisconsin, both about 60 miles away, and the Chicago suburbs where my sister lived. Our 200-acre farm was a traditional small family farm. We raised pigs and chickens, planted corn and oats and alfalfa. My main chore every night was to ride my horse to bring the cows home to be milked. My parents allowed me to come to Chicago because my sister lived in the suburbs, but my high school coach warned me that I'd better not join that radical Students for a Democratic Society. In retrospect, my childhood was pretty idyllic, but the experience was a narrow one. I'll never forget my first week at Chicago. Girls getting together in Flint House, getting to know each other, sharing experiences, the great cities they had traveled to, the famous museums they had visited, the prep schools they had attended. Suddenly, I realized I was in a whole new world, in more ways than just academically. Diversity in my high school consisted of Catholics and several types of Protestants. Fortunately, my roommate was a farm girl from Wisconsin, so at least we could talk to each other. Similar experiences awaited me in the classroom. My high school had no AP classes, and I did not pass out of anything in Chicago, so that meant a full load all the way through. I didn't speak up much in class. Other students readily quoted famous philosophers and historians and compared their writings, and that was before they were assigned reading. But I was not completely lost. My small high school team, as it's been mentioned, had an outstanding softball program. I played left field on the Iowa State Championship team when I was a freshman. And we also had a fledgling girls track program, and I loved sports. So very quickly, I found my way to Ida Noyes Hall. And that fall, the volleyball team. It was wonderful. The women's programs in those days were a few steps above intramurals, very different from the athletic programs today. We played Mundelein and Wheaton and Concordia and other nearby schools. We competed in the AIAW. Our coaches drove us to the game in their van and station wagons, which led to more than one unexpected adventure. After the game, we shared lemonade and orange slices with the opposing team and stopped for pizza on the way home. It was great. Although basketball would follow in the winter quarter, when I arrived, there was no softball program, and that was my sport. Fortunately, Coach Patricia Kirby had also arrived that year in 1967, and she had played some pretty high-level softball herself in Kansas. So I talked to her about the University of Chicago starting an intercollegiate softball team. I suspect she was already thinking about it, and anyway, she was all in favor of the idea. And so we got a team together. We had some practices, and we started to play other colleges. Only many years later did I think about how this could have come about, that these things don't just happen. The support of the administration was needed. But of course, we had the incredible good fortune to have Mary Jean Mulvaney as the director of women's athletics. Little did I know then, but this woman could do anything she set her mind to. So I still don't know what strings she needed to pull for us to have a softball program that very spring. I only know that by spring quarter, we had a lineup of other schools to play. And we didn't really have a practice field that quarter or for some time to come. We set up bases and practiced on the midway. Our uniforms, maroon shorts and white blouses with numbers, have been around for quite a few years. We use the same uniforms for every sport. The age of the uniforms did lead to at least one unfortunate incident when, early on as the catcher, I threw down to second base and my blouse split down the back. Fortunately, split down the back anyway. Fortunately, the problem was solved by the ever-resourceful Miss Mulvaney, who for some reason had duct tape with her. It was all wonderful. All of this is to say that a lost farm girl from Iowa found a home, found a place where she fit in, where she was known and cared for. I had a place to turn when I was in trouble or overwhelmed or just needed a break. I know that regardless of their backgrounds, my teammates felt the same. We were a family. I was at Chicago from 1967 to 1971, a time of great turmoil in our nation and our campus. The Department of Athletics, Coach Kirby, Miss Mulvaney, and my teammates were how I survived. Were what enabled me to get such an outstanding education, to open the world beyond Alpha, Iowa to me, to open my mind to the original sources, to a life of learning and the excitement that these new worlds bring. So I thank the University of Chicago, and I thank Ms. Kirby and Ms. Mulvaney and all of my teammates. I appreciate this honor very much, but really, it is I who honor you and all you have done for me and for other student athletes. Thank you.
Wow. First, I just want to thank Lester Munson as our Master of Ceremonies. And I also like to acknowledge our narrator on the video, who is not with us, but many of you know him. He is John Fitzgerald, our baseball coach. He also broadcasts our football games. It's his fallback career if this coaching thing doesn't work out, but he's doing great, so we're okay. I'm going to bring up Dennis Walden, but before I do, just want to acknowledge all of our inductees again tonight. What, again, such an impressive group and such a representation of what the University of Chicago and what the Maroons are all about. Patrick, I had the real misfortune of having to run in one cross-country race when I was in college. I'm a basketball player. This crazy situation happened my senior year. I definitely did not have any kind of perfect race, so I probably have all 7 left in me, maybe. But I don't think I'm cut out for that. And I think in the video, Coach Hall might still have that tie that was in there. We got to get rid of those. Frank, it takes a man of great security to bring probably an even bigger superstar with you in your fan club, so thank you for being here, Carol Mosley Braun. What an inspiration, though. What a fighter, what a survivor, what a role model for people here, and you're exactly right. Love the debate on ideas, and I'll have that Division I, Division III debate with you anytime. We have genius here in our program for sure. Beth, maybe a little too much information in that video, but it's nothing like being humbled by teammates, and you picked a good 2 to do that. So I'd really identify with your mom being here and kind of being your person. That's definitely true for me, and my mom always was the one who was my greatest champion, greatest advocate to be whatever I wanted to be and really push in that direction. So thank you, Mom, for being here and coming out. And I'm sure Ruth would have loved to have coached you. You seem like the perfect kind of person for Ruth. Even your sense of humor would have worked out really well, but just missed each other. But Joseph, just tremendous message about family. Felt the love for sure. And thank you so much for sharing that. Such a personal journey for you. And that truly with family is what finding and keeping perspective is all about. So thanks for those words. Diane, those pre-Title IX days, so inspirational. I definitely don't carry duct tape to anything. We're beyond that, thankfully. But thank you for sharing those stories. And I think, again, just such a great recollection and remembrances for people to understand where we've had to come from. But in the essence, what was always there and still is the community that is created in what we do. And that's really at the core what it's all about. So thank you for sharing that. So with that, we have Dennis Walden to close us out. He is our chair of the selection committee. He's a graduate of the college. He's the winner of the Stag Medal from 1969, and he is currently the president of the Graduate Order of the Sea. So please welcome up Dennis Walden.
Thanks, Aaron. On behalf of the selection committee, congratulations to all of the inductees, and thanks for all of the time and effort of the selection committee members for all of their efforts and their obviously wise selections. Thanks to all of you for attending. Where's Lester? Thank you, Lester. 15 years in a row and still rolling, so thanks. Also, we should thank Katie Britton, Nicole Watkins, and Nathan Lindquist of the athletic department for putting all this together. Thank you. And thanks to Dean Michelle Rasmussen for being here and the comments. It's an ongoing tradition, of course, that athletics is a very important part of campus life. With regard to the Hall of Fame selection process, we have our meetings in the spring, and we're always looking for more information and nominees, and they can be posted to the athletic department website. For tomorrow, you're all encouraged to attend the homecoming events. The block party starts at 11 at 56th and Ellis. Football game against Beloit starts at 1:30, and all attendees here have complimentary attendance. Go to the will call booth, whatever that is. Anyway, you get in for free. And the Hall of Fame inductees will be introduced at halftime. At the conclusion of this event, you're all invited to go back up to the 12th floor for the reception. The inductees also to the 12th floor for photos, please. For student athletes who are looking to get back to campus on the shuttle bus, you probably should get down there pretty soon, is what I've been told. And now I would like to introduce the men's a cappella choir, and that will lead us in the alma mater, the last page in your program. Hope to see everyone next year. Enjoy the reception. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We are Chicago Men's a cappella, UChicago's best-dressed men's a cappella group. We'll be singing for each night first our signature song, I'm Strong for Chicago, followed by the alma mater, which we invite you to join in. I believe you have the words in your programs. Without further ado,